The Cardinals experiment has failed. If you clicked on this video, then you probably already know that the St. Louis Cardinals have been the most disappointing team in baseball thus far. And it's all because of one shift in philosophy. If you're wondering how that one subtle change has led to this dumpster fire of a start, then you're in the right place, because we're going to break it down for you. The Cardinals, right now, Kyle, are a cellar dweller in the National League, which begs the question, where's the biggest hole in this roster?
It's got to be the pitching, Jake. I mean, their offense hasn't actually been that bad, all things considered. If you look at their record, they're 21st in the league in ERA, and that's just not going to cut it for a team that had playoff hopes coming into this season. So talk about who you like in this rotation and who you don't like.
Man, it depends on what I like them as. I don't like any of them as an ace. I don't like any of them as a number two. I know Michaelis was an all-star last year. Wainwright's been good of his career, but Wainwright, let's face it, in baseball terms, he's geriatric at this point. Flaherty looked like he had a lot of promise. I labeled him as their biggest X factor coming into the year, but his control issues are still prevalent, and it doesn't really look like they have any help on the way. I mean, you look at their 40-man roster, Hudson, Liberator, and Woodford. People are high on Liberator. I'm not as high. I still think he can be very good, but he's not going to help them this year. So you start to look for answers this year, and there really aren't any. I think the Cardinals know that, and I think that's honestly why Wilson Contreras has been made to be the scapegoat. I mean, honestly, I think it's deplorable. What do you think?
I'm glad you brought that up, because this whole Wilson Contreras situation is one of the craziest that I've seen in baseball in recent memory. I mean, even worse than the Cardinals' record to this point, which has been bad, the fact that they have openly and publicly made the new signing the public face and scapegoat of like all the problems to this point. Like, if you had concerns behind the scenes, why would you go out and publicize it and say, we're not starting him at catcher anymore? We're going to move him to the DH in the outfield.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point what you brought up about taking it public. It's really strange to pull the plug a month into a 5-year deal where you brought in this guy to catch, right, to lead the pitching staff. What's really interesting to me, and Kyle, you brought this up to me, I think a few days ago, about Yadier Molina. I think even the Cardinals didn't realize how much they were going to miss Yadier Molina until Yadier Molina was gone. I mean, you've never heard of issues with Wilson Contreras being ill-prepared for games. Like, Wilson Contreras, he's been coachable. He's been a consummate professional. And that's all you really ever hear about him in terms of his preparation. So, I mean, him being scapegoated in this way, it just, honestly, it screams of desperation on the Cardinals' behalf. And I think they're in trouble, and I think they know it.
Yeah, I got to agree with you there. It's crazy because they kind of set him up to fail in a way. Like, the point you mentioned, like, this pitching staff is not good. And then you're asking this guy to come in and make it a good rotation. Like, what is Wilson Contreras supposed to do?
I know, it's like they basically are blaming Wilson Contreras for not being as good as Yadier Molina at Yadier Molina's best skill, and what will probably single-handedly put him in the Hall of Fame.
It seems that the organizational philosophy when it comes to pitchers is trending away from strikeouts for the Cardinals, which is really interesting given that the shift is now banned and strikeouts have become even more important because it's harder to get ground balls into outs. And I think that's another reason why you've seen the pitching staff numbers take a step back from what it was last season. They don't have many strikeout guys in the staff, and I think it's showing. And like you said, I think they're realizing that they're in a problem.
I think it's an interesting point that you bring up, because when you look at the trade acquisitions they've made to help their starting pitching, they bring over Montgomery, much better ground ball guy than a K per 9 guy. They bring over Quintana, who at this stage of his career is not a K per 9 guy either.
A few years ago, the Cardinals had probably the best infield defense in the majors, so it was working for them. But those guys are getting older, and I don't think their defense is quite as good as it used to be, and I think that's another problem that we're seeing with their results.
Yeah, but even in the short term, right, while they're still very good, I mean, you talk about moving Contreras to DH, that's actually a huge deal, right? And it has a ripple effect across the rest of their roster, right? I mean, you look at who's been occupying that DH role for the Cardinals. It's been Nolan Gorman, who's been mashing, right? So you take him out of that DH, you put him at second. I mean, you had a full Gold Glove defense in the infield before that. right? So now you're just creating a logjam there. Now you got to move Donovan to an already way over clogged outfield. Less is more sometimes. You know what I mean? Like some of these pieces could have been moved. Honestly, like would it hurt to watch them go and grow somewhere else into potential all-star players? Yeah, but now you've got a whole, really a 40-man roster, it feels like, that's unable to tap into that potential. I think you're seeing that with guys like Carlson, Tyler O'Neill, Jordan Walker, Lars Nootbaar. I really feel like you're seeing that.
Yeah, it's really an interesting pickle to be in because depth is so important in baseball, and a lot of time depth can outperform, star power, especially in the regular season. It makes sense for a team to want to try to hoard all that depth, but to your point, they've almost taken that to the extreme, and now they've got everyone splitting time with other players. I mean, Jordan Walker should be in the big leagues right now, but there's no room for him, and that's hurting his development. I mean, there's no other way around it. I see no way they don't try to move one of these pieces during this season, probably for a starting pitcher. They better be very active at the deadline.
But I got to tell you, man, I'm not. I feel like you look at this time last year, maybe the value of Carlson's gone down, the value of O'Neill's gone down, the value of, I mean, maybe other guys like Yepes, Nootbaar, like all these. None of these guys are as valuable. So now you're going to have to give up more capital, I feel like, to get a Dylan Cease for sure.
It's crazy, too, because we grew up in an era where the Cardinals were, kind of the gold standard of player development and turning nothing into something, both on the pitching side and the hitting side, but primarily the pitching side. And it almost seems like they've lost that touch. Brendan Donovan or Lars Nootbaar were supposed to take that next step, but they haven't yet. Their other big names are, they acquired Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. But when's the last time that they've truly developed a star player that they were so known for doing in the Yadier Molina and Albert Pujols days?
And I think that point you just made is important, Kyle. And this is why. I mean, when you look at the title of this video, right, the failed experiment, back when the Cardinals were competing for World Series regularly, pitching was their focal point, right? Now, obviously, having Yadier Molina to help aid that along was a huge deal. But that was the core of their team. That was what made them successful. They veered too far away from that, right? They heard all the, we don't score enough runs. So that what they did is they go out and they get a Paul Goldschmidt. They get Nolan Arenado, right? They go out and they try to get Marcell Ozuna, right? Before Goldschmidt and Arenado. And look how that worked out.
For those that do not know, in the deal where the Cardinals acquired Marcell Ozuna from the Marlins, was it?
Yes, it was the Marlins.
The Cardinals dealt two pitching prospects. One was Sandy Alcantara, and the other was Zach Gallen. And for a team that is so desperate for an ace right now, they lost two right there. I don't foresee their pitching staff ending the season 21st in ERA. The metrics point to them being a little bit better than that. And like you said, the offense should get better too. I mean, this was an offense that before the season, we were talking about it being maybe the best in baseball.
It's a bit of a nightmarish scenario. It seems like they're going to be just kind of caught in the middle, right? Mm-hmm. With an aging Nolan, aging Paul Goldschmidt, kind of just stuck in this land of mediocrity. There's not really a real goal in mind. You can't fully rebuild. You can't fully go until you get some more help. And that help could be, you're not going to get it all at once. That's for sure, no matter how good Liberatore is. So those are our thoughts on why the St. Louis Cardinals have been such a letdown. If you enjoyed this video, check out why I think John Fisher has proven himself yet again to be the worst owner in baseball. Or check out Kyle's analytical breakdown of Rowdy Tellez and why he thinks Rowdy Tellez could be the next Pete Alonso. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you over there.